It's Memorial Day weekend, and we're going to go to Pricketts Fort State Park in Fairmont, West Virginia. The park opened to the public in 1976. We're going to tour Job's house, see the reconstructed fort, the museum, and the blacksmith. And we're going to walk through the Pricketts graveyard and go get something to eat at the State Park restaurant. The first parking lot was full, so we check out one of the others. This parking lot is also a parking lot for the Rails to Trails, located right here. The zigzag wooden fences are called worm fences or snake fences or battlefield fences.
There's a rail trail bike path here.
There's a map showing where all the trail goes. You could even ride to Morgantown, West Virginia. Bathroom, first stop. Nice e-bikes. Then we need to buy our tickets at the Visitor Center. We buy tickets like to take...
Yeah,
like,
if you want to go inside the fort.
Okay, and we can go around, and then if we get tickets, we can go inside, right?
Yeah, if you get tickets, you could go in the fort. You can look in the blacksmith shop, which he's here today, and then also take a guided tour of the Prickett house, Joe Prickett house that's behind us.
Okay.
Which the next one for that's at 1.
Okay, so we need 2 tickets?
2 adults?
Yes.
These will be for your shirt. Whoops. For your shirts. So it'll be $16.96. The porch and the sidewalk, it goes right to the house. And someone from the fort walks over and gives that tour.
Okay.
But the blacksmith, the fort is at your own pace.
Okay. And we just put the stickers on our shirts,
Yeah,
right?
just on your shirts. And then we have a restaurant down past the fort.
Okay.
The bathrooms are over here, which you'll see when you're going to the Joe
We've already
house.
been there.
Oh, okay.
So that is, the house is on the back side of the bathrooms?
Yes,
Okay.
it's red brick. You can't miss it. And then in this building, if you want to come back, we have a museum and a library.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
She said the tour starts at 1 and it's 12:50. During the summer, the park's 400-seat outdoor amphitheater hosts various performances, including theatrical productions by Fairmont State University. The amphitheater is located below the restroom and Job's house. Gotta go down toward the house and wait. This is the back of the building we just came out of. When we're done, we're gonna go through the museum part. Possible old outhouse. And over there's the fort that we get to go through too. She said the blacksmith is in today too.
And here you see in the ground, one of the things that Dorothy, Jacob's wife, wanted when she moved out here was a well in her front yard. So in 1772, Jacob and his oldest sons dug that well. That well is covered like that because it's still a viable well. And when we have 150 school kids out here on the school tour, nobody's allowed to go swimming. Yeah. So that's why it stays covered, but it is still a good well. Now the original fort was the Jacob homestead. It was a double log cabin with the dog trot down the middle. And then they had built a second story above dog trot cabin. That second story did not have windows, but it had gun ports. So when the Prickett farm was chosen for the neighborhood's militia against the Indian wars that had lasted 20 years out here, what they did was build a palisade wall, and on the memorial fort, the palisade wall represents Prickett Fort. And it went around that well and that log cabin. Now, one of the ways we know that it was here is when Job was building this house, he wrote a letter to his brother John, and we have a copy, we've seen the letter, that he had to pull the palisade wall stumps out from around to put his foundation in, to have something that all of these bricks could sit on. Job was one of the 437 great-grandchildren of Jacob and Dorothy. And when he inherited that old log cabin, it didn't take long before Louisa, his wife, said, I want a better house. Because an 80-year-old log cabin is full of mold and rot and all of that. Job took his sons and they went to the Monongahela River. Monongahela is a Shawnee Indian word meaning river of crumbling clay banks. So needless to say, they found the clay pit pretty quick, dug the clay, formed their bricks, fired their bricks, and started building this house in 1858. By 1861, Louisa is pregnant. And she tells Job she's not having babies in that old log cabin, and Job tells her the house isn't quite done yet. So he goes on out into the field to do his farming, and she packs up and moves in. So welcome to the Job house. This is very much what she walked into. Now, the Pricketts actually lived here until the late 1950s, early 1960s. And at that time, the federal government decided to put in the Opequiskie locks and dams. That was to raise the Monongahela River, because in the summer, especially if it was a drought summer, you could walk across the Monongahela and never get your feet wet, just stepping on the stones. And the creek back here, the Pricketts Creek, would also go so low that you didn't really have a creek. When the government did that, they declared this a 100-year floodplain. And no, it has never flooded. But what can you do? So at that time, they bought out the Pricketts, who just moved to another 5 acres on the other 500 acres on the other side of the rail trail. Government went ahead, built their locks and dams so they could get the coal and timber out of this area and sent up to Pittsburgh. And then the government came in with a bulldozer, trying to take out everything that was abandoned, so that they wouldn't be responsible if anybody got hurt in any of the old buildings. Well, they got the big barn before anybody knew what was happening, and also some of the outbuildings. When it came time for them to bulldoze this house, Irene and Nellie Prickett stood on that porch with the Marion County Historic Society and said, you can't have it. So they went to the state. The state now rents 180 acres off of the federal government to create Prickett Fort State Park. And then as a member of the Prickett Fort Memorial Foundation, those of us who work here keep this place going. So thanks for buying your tickets, because that's what happens to keep us alive, helps keep us alive.
Did I understand they lived here till the 1950s or 1850s?
1950s.
Oh, wow.
Yes, over 100 years. Now, one of the things the bulldozer did was knock a huge black walnut tree into this wall. This whole area was black walnut at the time when they first built this house. You'll notice all the wood in the house is black walnut. They just took it off their own grounds, and that's where it came from. So when they knocked this wall out, we got very good at asking for help, and decided, they sent out word we wanted old brick. If you had any old brick that you were willing to donate. So that's why that has more of an orange look to it than the red, because that is a lot of the donated brick. It's also why the hearth isn't deep enough to be a true cooking hearth. But it represents what it was, and we'll take it and be glad we got it. 90% of the stuff in this house was donated or left here by the Pricketts. One of the funniest looking things they left, how about that for a mouse trap? And I tell the school kids even mice have to exercise. And I think that was for the noise, so that they actually knew they had trapped something. The book of the day was The American Frugal Housewife. It told you what herbs you needed to grow for food, what herbs you grow for medicinal purposes, different recipes, how to make breads and stuff out of your cornmeal, and just anything, because they never wasted anything. It was definitely not the throwaway society we have now. Among other things left at the house was the dry sink. Of course, you get your water out of the well, and then this pan inside was what you would dump to get rid of it, probably right out the window. Sugar box. Now this was called a sugar box because this lid is so tight to the bottom, ants and mice can't get in. So you could literally keep your sugar in there without it getting contaminated. There's a butter bowl made from one piece of tree trunk that was hollowed out. It's just all one piece. And then the butter paddle was taken out of the rest of it. Coffee was already the drink of the day. So we have the old coffee grinder. Next to it is our jar of coffee beans. Now I would really think twice right now before I grind those beans. We've been open 50 years. And the beans have been there 50 years apiece. Actually your popcorn popper.
Yep.
Put your popcorn in it, put it directly in your fire, and away they go. They have popcorn that night. The most ornate piece left in the house is the copperwork on the bellows for the fireplace, which you are welcome to look at if you'd like to. Kerosene, of course, were your lights. Sorry, none of my lamps are full, can't light them. A day bed was common in your kitchen. You spent 90% of your time in the kitchen. You laid your babies there while you were working. We know somebody had a broken leg. There's crutches in the cupboard under the stairs, so they would have spent time on that bed. And if somebody was actually sick, they would have been there also. One of the interesting things that was an outbuilding that was rescued, I should say, before the government got to it, was Stutzman's improved fruit evaporator. And what it would be in an outbuilding, because outbuildings had packed clay floors. And you would put shovels full of hot coals from your fireplace in the bottom. And in here, you would put your fruit, fish, meat, and it's a dehydrator. So, but you had to use it out in the outbuilding because you didn't want to burn your house down. Everything was kept in cupboards. There were no closets as we know them today. And if you said something about a hanger, they would probably think of a noose to hang people. So the two iron pieces on the walls, one on either side of the window, is our rug beaters. The only way you could get your rugs clean, take them outside, throw them over a tree limb or some kind of a line and beat the dirt out of them. Now some people remark about how low the chairs are. Average woman back then was anywhere between 4'7" and 5 foot tall. The average man was only up to about 5'10". If you were over 6 foot, you were considered a giant. So people didn't really start getting as big as people are today until they started putting all the hormones and crap in the cows and stuff. It is a step up to go into the next room.
Look at the wear on that stuff.
This room would have been the equivalent of the living room and also the parents' bedroom. Okay? In here we have true antiques, a 1600s trunk and rocker, a 1700s candlestick table and rocker. Now one of the ways you can tell the difference in the era of the rocker, the 1600 has no armrest. You were so busy shelling corn and shucking peas and taking care of babies, the last thing you wanted was black and blue elbows. Now the cupboard under the stairs, of course, has the crutches. It also has the pickling crock. At the end of the season, when there were only 5 tomatoes left, maybe 2 cucumbers, a couple onions, everything got thrown into one big crock and was pickled. Even if you were eating watermelon, they would clean and save the rind and pickle it. Nothing was wasted. And that way you had food in February before, when everything was gone pretty much. This bed is original to the Prickett family, and it is a rope bed. And you've all heard that saying, sleep tight. Well, the sleep tight is originated with rope bed because rope stretches. And after a while, everybody's rolling in the middle. So they would take a tool like this,
Bed jack.
put it over the rope and twist to tighten that rope. And then they would retie all the knots that are underneath. This mattress is stuffed with straw, women's bed straw, and feathers. It is a true feather trick mattress. This bed cover is called jacquard. Jacquard was the gentleman who figured out how to weave so that you had blue on one side, and it was white on the other, and vice versa. Okay? And to the best of my knowledge, that can take up to 16 heddles. Now this loom over here is a 4 heddle. And right now I'm weaving a shawl on it. But 4 heddle are the heddles are the parts that control the threads and keep them separated and stuff. So can you imagine having something to work with 16 of those? I'll never make it. Under the bed we have the trundle. It would be pulled out at night for the infants and babies or whichever kid was afraid to sleep upstairs. Upstairs are 2 rooms, identical in size and shape as these 2. Girls slept in the back room, the boys slept in the front room. The idea, because it was Civil War time, was that if anybody decided to raid and get to the girls, the boys could protect them. I'm not allowed to take you up. The EMTs cannot properly get a gurney or whatever they call them things up the steps and get you safely back down, and they weren't willing to put somebody out the window. So,
Fair enough.
But it was quicker.
it probably would have been. Those steps are hard to get up and down. Under the bed we have the chamber pot. You didn't want to go outside at night because of bears, wolves, copperheads, timber rattlers. Take your choice. Any of them would be happy to have you for supper. And then the tall one is a bed warmer. They would fill it full of hot water, boiling water, probably from the tea kettle on the hearth. Put that cork in good and tight because you're going to sweep it up and down this feather tick to get it warm on a cold winter night, and even maybe leave it sit on the end of your bed to keep your feet warm. The porcelainware in the cabinet is also Pricketts. That was their fine china of the day, and they have been donating it throughout the whole family. We have this display, we have one in the museum, and we probably have 1,000 pieces in storage.
Wow.
Because nobody wants it. The tri-leaf emblem on it is gold. Can't be put in the microwave, can't be put in the dishwasher, and we're lazy now. Home decor. Courier Knives put out 300 colored prints. You bought the print and made your own frame. And that's what those are. Kerosene was the only lighting.
How do you know how old or distinguish
Mostly
where
the
it's from
style.
originated, or do you know? I haven't checked into it.
We
but-
do know that this one, the ones with the rounded glow bottom,
Mhm.
are true antiques. This one was a replacement probably from the 1940s. And there's more. The hobnail ones came later than just the plain round ones.
Mhm.
The decorative ones, of course, were far more expensive even back then. And you bought your kerosene in Fairmont. Fairmont is 7 miles away today, the same as it was back then. But back then, that 7 miles was a long buggy ride. Instead of being 5 minutes by car. Well, 12 if you're legal.
Where was the nearest 7-Eleven back then?
100 miles in Winchester or 100 miles in Fort Pitt. Fairmont had started to be a town by then.
Winchester actually 100 miles from here?
104.
Is it? Okay.
Either way,
Yeah.
if you were going to a trading post,
Yeah.
100 miles, go north or go
Long
south.
ways.
And you walked because you followed deer trails back then. Now you could get the original road, as far as we can figure out, looking at all kinds of different. In 1794, what is now Route 19 was started in Morgantown and went as far as Clarksburg. And it took them like 7 years to get it that far.
Wow.
We're almost into the 1800s before there was an actual road out here. Okay?
Is this the modern air conditioning system in the
Of
time?
course. Open the top transoms, all the heat goes out. And 3 brick thick walls
Oh, wow.
definitely work like air conditioning in the summer. It is always cool in here until you open the doors. And then all the heat rolls in.
When you're weaving, nice tight weaves.
Thank you. I'll get it done one of these days.
If it wasn't for pesky tourists.
When the wife said, packed up her bags and moved in. What had been built at that point?
These
Where-
rooms were finished.
Okay.
The walls are plastered and they have been whitewashed. Whitewash is made with limestone, calcium stone, and water. Limestone's a bug repellent, so they wanted everything whitewashed. And if you ever read Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, he's trying to con somebody into helping him whitewash the fence. They whitewash the inside of the barns to help keep the bugs away from their cows or chickens or whatever. So that's why whitewash was quite common out here. We'd call it the front room. Some would call it the guest room. Some would call it the best room. At the time it was called the parlor. Okay? Now this would be where you would have weddings, wakes, and by now you could have Christmas. Up until Victoria and Albert were on the throne, the Christmas tree was considered to be a pagan object of worship. And then once Albert brought it from Germany and it was an object of celebration, then a family could have a Christmas tree in their home. So this would be the room that they would have Christmas in. In 1865, Louisa died of consumption. Consumption being what we call tuberculosis now. Well, when she passed, she left Job with 9 kids. So Job, on one of his trips to barter and trade, met Rebecca. Rebecca is a widow with 2 kids. Rebecca and Job marry and have 5 more kids. So now there's 14 Pricketts and 2 steps running around. From what we could gather from everything we've looked at, 10 of those children actually lived in this house. The other 4 were old enough to be married by now and be given Job grandkids. The original Pricketts, Dorothy and Jacob, had 11 children. Isaiah was killed and scalped by the Indians, which left them 10. Those 10 gave them 127 grandchildren. Those 127 gave them 132 or 34 great-grandchildren, of which Job was one. And it just keeps going. Kimberly Prickett Miller, who lives on the 500 acres across the rail trail, has the genealogy tree, which shows well over 1,000 descendants of the 11th generation. So, they're still here. And when Dorothy passed away, Jacob took his older sons. They went over to Brown County, Ohio, started another farm, did it all over again. And he's buried over in Brown County, Ohio, to the best of our knowledge. Now, Rebecca was from a family of a little bit of wealth and influence, and we believe this fancy furniture came from her. It is very Victorian, ornately carved, well overstuffed, and very heavy. So you'll notice wheels on the front. The reason for the wheels was if you just shoved it across the room to change your decor, it would gouge your floors and scratch them up. So they'd pick it up by the back, put it on its wheels, wheel it to where they wanted, and then settle it back down. That way you saved your floors. The Singer is a 1903, belt-driven, and yes, it still works. We usually hand sew most of our costume, but when you got this really long seam nobody will ever see, you sneak over here and run a long seam.
How embarrassing if you're the fire chief and your firehouse burns down.
While you're fighting the fire across the street.
The hook in the ceiling for a hanging lantern?
Apparently, but since every antique or even reproduction of the kind of lantern that would be there is well over $25,000,
Yeah, you don't get it.
it gets the kissing ball at Christmas. And we do open up the weekend after Thanksgiving and the first weekend of December for candlelit Christmas tours. We have everything lit up with candles and the kerosene lamps, and we have the big Christmas tree. And we had one of the first artificial trees ever made. They were called feather trees, and it was duck and goose feathers tied like you tie a fishing tie onto pieces of wire that were shaped like a tree. And they did that in England because the first time England told their people they could have Christmas trees, they almost deforested land they were on. So after that, they had to make use with artificial ones. Now the rug you see on the floor is from the 1800s. The lady who donated it said it was in front of a wood burning fire. And you can see where a burning log probably rolled out. So we took another red and blue rug and did our best to patch it. But we like to show that in the 1800s they could actually weave, and this is a wool rug, that they could actually weave such intricate patterns. Not out here. It would have come from Philadelphia or New York or one of the big cities. But I think it's really a neat rug. And wool, of course, melts. It doesn't flame. Kind of like linen, it doesn't create big flames, but it will melt, and so will linen. Which is why most of your people back between the 17 and 1800s wore the linen or wore wool, not only to keep warm, but when you're working over open fires all the time, you don't want to catch fire. I can tell you a little bit about some of the machines on the porch if you'd like to. Get your apple cider juice out of it for about 6 weeks, and then you'd have apple jack as it started to ferment. And then not long after that, you'd have apple cider vinegar that you could use to clean your house. So nothing was wasted. The farm machinery, that is the older one. That is 1784, I believe, and this is the newer one. And what these are corn shellers. You would get, your corn would stay in the field until it was as dry as popcorn. They would take the cob with all that corn on it and put it in here, turn the crank on the back, and these teeth would then knock the kernels into a bowl that was under on the bottom. And then it would spit the cob back out, and you would put it over here with all the greens that you had gathered, and that would make the silage. That mulches and chops and works it all together. Now that is the older version of this. And your corn would, your cob would go in the chute, and again, you put a bowl underneath, here's your teeth, and that would take all the kernels off and spit the cob back out.
Now, would they use that corn, rehydrate it, and then?
You could
cook it, or-
rehydrate it for hominy. You could grind it as it was for cornbread, cornmeal,
Okay.
corn pone. Corn was one of the three sisters out here were corn, beans, and squash. Because when you chop the trees down, you still had all the roots and you couldn't plow, you would make mounds of dirt. Plant your corn in the middle. When it's about 3 to 4 inches tall, you would plant your pole beans around them. They didn't have the bush beans that we have now. It would be pole beans that would climb up the corn stalk.
Ah.
And then you would plant squash or pumpkins around those, and the big leaves would act like your mulch. Keep the weeds down, keep the moisture in. So that was your that was your main food out here for 100 years or more. Corn, beans, and squash, and whatever you hunted an animal for your meat or fish. Of course, with the Mon River right there, you could get a lot of fish.
Yeah.
And that was before everything was so polluted. Thank you for coming. That's pretty much my spiel. You are free to walk back through the house, take pictures, anything you want. The fort is also open, and when Chris gets done rebuilding our gate, he'll be over in the blacksmith shop.
The park operates seasonally, with the Fort and Visitor Center open from mid-April through the end of October. After Labor Day, they're closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. Prickett State Park is a 188-acre park that features a reconstructed 18th century fort originally built in 1774 by Captain Jacob Prickett. The fort served as a refuge for settlers. During periods of conflict with the Native American tribes, the reconstructed fort offers a glimpse into frontier life, with costume interpreters demonstrating colonial-era crafts such as blacksmithing, spinning, and carpentry. I should mention that the address is 88 State Park Road in Fairmont, West Virginia. Zip is 26554. It was not a military fort, but a refuge fort, meaning it was constructed by and for civilians, Families from nearby homesteads would gather inside when they feared conflict. The reconstruction of Pricketts Fort actually began in 1971 when a concession agreement with the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources and the Pricketts Fort Memorial Foundation was forged. In 1972, concept drawings were prepared and submitted to the Department of Natural Resources and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In 1973, construction commenced in August, and the first blockhouse was built. By the spring of 1975, 2 blockhouses, 2 cabins, and the meeting house was completed, and the fort opened with limited activities and with volunteer interpreters.
Hinges, the nails, when they bring them to, then they bend them over. Everything's all hand-hewed.
Each of the little houses have chimneys.
This is a dried laid chimney on the meeting house. Dried laid is a technique where stone is stacked or laid without the use of mortar, which is much more difficult and time-consuming. On June 29, 1976, the park opened its historic attractions to the public with a grand ceremony and the 249th Army Band, the Virginia Color Guard, and a host of guests from the Department of Natural Resources. The fort is 110 square feet, and its walls are 12 feet high. It has 4 corner blockhouses, 16 small cabins, and 2 large central buildings. The log walls of Pricketts Fort are set 5 feet underground. The blockhouses were used as a lookout for the fort and were also the last defense position that could be used if the walls were ever breached by the enemy. The chinking, as it's called, is the filler between the logs. The meeting house houses most of the tools used in domestic life during the 18th century, including spinning, weaving, and hearth cooking. There's a spinning wheel in the meeting house that's 200 years old and still being used today, or at least it was 10 years ago. And that's the blacksmith doing some gate repair.
That was to that point, but your slats in between into the post are, and in the little buildings, that could be a dangerous little thing.
Well, the thing of it is, and if you look at those, you can't walk right up to them and stick your gun out. They would have had a step up to step up. So if you're on the outside of the fort, you cannot put your gun in and shoot in.
Okay.
It's too high. Okay, so they were designed to be up like that. And as far as the gun situation, think about by 1774, especially the French are trading with the natives strongly up around Detroit and up in that area up there. They're trading strongly. And one of the favorite trade items for the natives was the guns. So yeah, they're using guns. They were still using to a degree bows and arrows, but yeah, they're using the guns. They have access to them and are able to trade for the power. 50% or so. But yeah, they would have had guns.
So is this a normal crowd for a Sunday, or?
It's kind of busy. Our season really, well, this I guess you could say is the kickoff to the season. Memorial Day weekend, we'll start being busier. But we have the geocachers here today.
That's what a lot of these people
Yes.
in Canada.
Yes.
They were all over, but we were
So-
speaking to some.
We were very busy yesterday, and we'll be here back to our work. Staying open late tonight because of the geocachers. They're finishing up their weekend. So
Are they earth caches or physical caches that they're finding, or do you know?
I'm not a person. I guess the way it's set up, the one that they have here, and they're doing the closing ceremony tonight here at the amphitheater. But there's 5 clues having to do with this area, and they have to go to the area. One of them is on the porch of the Job house. We kind of laugh about it because it's supposed to be something to do with the vegetable And what it is the corn husker. The corn's grain, so they mess up there. The one for the fort, they don't have to come into the fort, but the one for the fort is who was a famous person who a war was named after, which is Lord Dunmore. And then there's one down over the hill, there's one in the cemetery, and there's one more somewhere. I don't know, I haven't followed it. But then when they find these 5 clues, and they report them in their phones, then they're given a combination, which opens a box, and if you pre-register to do it, you get a coin. I don't know, I'm not into geocaching too much.
That's pretty neat.
They actually had a conference in Morgantown, and they were
What the one fella said that there was.
expecting about 5,000 people.
It's what the one gentleman said, 5,000. That's a
Here
lot.
tonight, they're expecting, I was told, and they don't know for sure, but one of the gentlemen that does it said that there could be about 500 people here. So
Wow.
we don't know for sure. That's what we've been told, and they're speculating. But
How do they, I see these are candles, I assume, hanging there.
yes.
How did they make the candles?
Well, they would have done their candles, made their candles with tallow,
Okay.
the beef fat. These are done with paraffin. With our school tours, if they pay extra, the kids get to make a candle. So we melt the wax for them to make a candle and get to dip their candles. Well, after they're finished, they're still melted wax in the pot. So we use our candle dipping back there, and we dip these candles. These are what we use for our candlelight tour that we do in November, and any activities that we would have here in the evening, we use those candles. But they would have done tallow. Now, what we dip in the fall, or if we need any next door for sale, we actually do a tallow beeswax combination. They wouldn't have had the beeswax out here on Frontier, although they have it back east. But the honeybees aren't native to North America, so they had to be brought in, and then, of course, back east they have them, but the ones that were out here would have been wild bees, which would be in trees and things like that. So they would want to collect the honey, but they don't want to destroy the hive to get the beeswax, so they're going to harvest the honey and leave the beeswax pretty much alone as much as possible. So they wouldn't have had that opportunity to have the beeswax out here.
And to make them bigger, you just keep dipping
You
them.
just keep dipping. It has a little bit to do. Over there hanging on the shelf, you'll see
I see little
there's,
ones over there.
well, on that shelf, there's 4 of them hanging. The one on the right is after 10 dips, the next one's 20 dips, the next 30, and the next 40.
Okay.
So that kind of gives you an idea. And it has to do also with the temperature of the wax and the temperature in the room when we do it. If the wax has been melted and let it cool just a little bit, it collects a little bit more solid than on there. It doesn't take as many dips. So there's some variables that go with that.
Yeah, but most people are totally lost, but I mean, just it's amazing what they can do with what they have.
And that is our
The mascot.
rodent control officer. She's our mouser. Her name is Olive.
Does she do, is she
And
been around a while?
she is good at catching mice. So, and no, she's not pregnant. She just got fat this winter
Yeah, I had
and
one
hasn't
that,
worked it off yet.
I had one that was pretty chunky, but she was up in the heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have cats and dogs, so you get it too. But they're all lovable.
She's pretty.
Yeah, she is. She's the mouse control officer. I imagine you could get a few of them out here because you got the caps and the lid and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But this is
There's a
really
lot
nice.
some days. So,
Oh, thank you for sharing that with
no,
us.
you're quite welcome.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody told you, but the little cabins are from like Doddridge Fort, and they are set up for women and children. Because up at Doddridge Fort, the women and children would have been in those, while the men would be outside fighting the Indians.
It's hard to believe that people actually live in there.
They didn't really live. The most they were in there was maybe up to 3 weeks. Because then they would go back to their farm
Okay.
and do,
So it was more like a place for them to
it
get
was a
away and
refuge.
stay. Yeah.
These were civilian refuge forts.
Okay.
And you can tell a refuge fort by the civilians from a military fort by the word fort.
Okay.
It's a military fort. It's going to be Fort Bragg, Fort Knox, Fort Drum, Fort whatever. If it's civilian, the name of the property owner comes first and then fort.
Oh,
Pricketts
interesting.
Fort,
Yeah, yeah.
Shin's Fort, Kern's Fort.
Yeah, that's really, it's good to
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because I've never known that, and I've been to a lot of
That
places
would be
like
hard
this.
for even 3 weeks, I mean.
Yeah, you bring
If
your
it-
cow and your kids and some food and
Just to
clothes
keep
and
them safe.
just to keep them safe, because your safety was in numbers.
Right.
It wasn't being behind that wall, it was in the number of people. Because if the Indians came, they came in canoes from the Ohio country,
Right,
and there might be 6, 8 of them.
right.
And if they see 30 people gathered around, they know they can't beat you,
So
so they don't attack.
They're just,
Yeah. Wow.
So, and most of the times when the Indians were over here, it was a hunting party, because that's why they didn't want anybody living in this land. They
Right.
had already been bartering with the English and the French for over 100 years,
Right.
and the English and the French wanted furs.
Wow.
So they didn't want the animals disturbed by us
I wanna
coming
show
in
my
and
grandkids
cutting down
Right.
trees and stuff, you
Oh,
know?
wow.
I think I took pictures, I want to show my grandkids, because they ask questions.
I will see you later then.
Yeah.
Nice,
To put the grooves into the barrel to make the lead ball spin whenever it's fired. Makes it a whole lot more accurate, but slower to load. Plenty of time, given I'm here till 7 p.m., so. Got your barrel there. And sticking out the end of that barrel, you can see the rod, which it's mounted onto as a slot for a sharpened blade. Bear in mind, you probably want your barrel heated red hot before you start. That would just make the process a whole lot easier. And then, once you have that barrel heated up, you'll step to the back, place your hands on these handles, start pulling this back like so. And as you're drawing these handles back, that will slowly bore out just part of just one of the grooves inside. Bearing in mind that if you try and do too much at once, you just get stuck early on. You have to fight with the blade for a few minutes to get it back out. But as you push it back through to complete your first cut, you'll be able to go back to the front and either lift the blade up by using a wooden wedge to wedge it upwards if you aren't trying to be super precise, or you could use individual pieces of paper to lift it up and measure it out that way if you're making, say, rifles to sell and your rifles are well known for how well made they are, that sort of thing. This technology was brought in particular by German settlers. Something about German ingenuity. Bear in mind, you would want 7 or 8 of them, depending on the caliber of the barrel, and in general, you can expect to take roughly 3 weeks to fully rifle just one barrel. Now, fortunately, that's what apprentices are for. All the busy work you don't really want to do yourself. So, meanwhile, a master gunsmith would be able to, say, use the wood lathe to turn out gun stocks, or maybe he might be responsible for hand forging each of the barrels here.
That was very interesting. The Pricketts Fort season is just getting going for this season. We picked up a calendar of events for the season. Lots will be going on. Now it's time to go to the museum. We still have much more to see. A view of the mountain close by, the lower parking lot by the water.
We're going to go back inside and see the museum part. This weekend is a geocaching event. They said there's 5,000 geocachers signed up for it, and tonight there'll be about 500 attending in the amphitheater, and part of the search is here.
Several varieties of plants with tags saying what they are. I see a bleeding heart plant.
Japanese painted fern.
This is the door that takes us to the museum.
Is that what you mean?
There's a guest book you can sign. This part is the gift shop, and it has several things that you can purchase. Homemade goat products, leather purses, and here's a 10-penny whistle. This is where you can find t-shirts and souvenirs. They also have hats, keychains, photos displayed above. And they have some unique gifts in this shop. Raccoon keychains.
Rabbit hides, $14.75.
Fairmont one. But now you have to buy something else or you're going
Book on Pricketts Fort, West Virginia, the history.
I mean, I'm sure I can find some.
And this is the way to the museum.
Donor plaque. Please help us reach our goal. It's in museum.
As you enter the stairway, there are photos hanging along the walls. There are 2 sections of steps to go up. And this display is in the hallway. There's a lot of interesting history and information in this museum. They have chairs you can sit on and a TV playing with a lot of information, a lot of history. They have displays in the middle of the room and the information on the walls with lots to read, with a timeline of events. You could spend a lot of time in this room learning. This represents a lot of research and a lot of documentation. There's information on who's buried in the Pricketts Fort Cemetery hanging on the wall. There's also information on the David Morgan headstone. You even have a view of the fort out the window. A headstone replica. And there's even a replica of the fort. Fiber tools used for spinning and making fabric. A blacksmith tools and display. Information and history on the Grand Union flag. Fort history. The TV you can watch history on. Job H. Prickett. A view of the Job House from the museum. Tea leaf ironstone china was produced in England. A history timeline from newer to older, a little like a family tree. We see smoke from the blacksmith shop, so we're going there now. Down the stairs and into a big main room. There's a library. It's a Thomas library. Looks like a lot of books and a lot of information. Another tour gathering at the Job House. As we were leaving, we found another hallway with some more plaques and information. We briefly looked things over, but we didn't stay long. Now we're back out on the porch of the gift, the information, and the museum place. The roof has wooden shingles. The blacksmith shop is 52 feet by 18 feet. It has a couple of forges and other equipment used during the last quarter of the 18th century. The Bray Blacksmith Shop at Pricketts Fort State Park offers visitors an immersive experience into the essential trade of blacksmithing during the 18th century. Named after Greg Bray, the shop was constructed using historic logs from a deconstructed house on the land of Benedum Airport.
Good morning. It is about that time, ain't it? Oh, right now I'm just trying to get her lit. I was over at the fort this morning trying to fix the gate. I figured we'd get too busy too quick, but we did. So I had to rush back down here to actually get it up and working temperature.
For that long?
Yeah.
Oh.
And how did you learn to do what you're doing?
In the coal forge, I just kind of showed up here one day and he said, figure it out.
So what do you make?
Mostly everything here on the corner of the table. A bunch of J hooks, S hooks, some silverware. Mostly the J hook and S hooks, just to sell over here at the trading post. I'm working on finishing out a couple axes.
And how long have you been working here?
About 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
So 3 weeks in a coal forge, about 2 years blacksmithing.
I bet you're the most photographed or videoed person here, huh? You're used to it?
It's pretty fun.
Where else did you blacksmith?
Just at the house.
At the house?
Yeah. I got bored one day and it sounded fun. It is fun, but man.
A lot of work.
Better make sure you're in shape before you start, or else you're going to be in shape. It hurts.
What kind of coal? Pittsburgh coal or?
Well, at the time, Pricketts had a nice exposed coal seam right here on the property.
Oh, did they?
So they got to go right over to the hill and just kind of knock it out.
Okay.
I do think he gets this coal from here in West Virginia. I'm not sure where. They're just piling of it out back, so I get it out back.
You get a hotter BTU burn out of Pittsburgh coal, or then that's what you do, for that.
Right.
That's a big thing. Now this is coal here,
Yep.
and this is the byproduct of what you're doing there, and then it becomes the steel. This is the coke.
Yep, coke.
That's what that is.
I knew you was gonna get it. Yeah, that's coke. That's just burnt coal. That one's not fully burnt, or else it'd just be ash. But that's coal with most of the oils and whatnot removed. And then the big rock here is actually out of the iron furnace. Of a iron furnace, I should say. I don't know where. But that's about first smelt on the iron ore. It's still got some rock and impurities in it. But that's actually the beginning of the steel.
Get your fire at home started as opposed to this, the bellows.
You probably
I've got propane.
All right.
These are pretty nice compared to some of them. These are actually great bellows dating back to the 13th century. So they're a two-stage, so it provides a constant flow of air.
Right.
It pumps it up through the pipe and into the top, so as the bottom comes back down, the top's still blowing. So it does a little bit of the work for me, but not a whole lot. This is what you used to do. You used to start as pump the bellows as an apprentice and get the fire started pumping the bellows, and then you would make 300 to 500 nails a day just to prove that you could move the metal and actually shake the head. You had a grasp on the basics of forging, and you didn't burn your metal too much. That was the problem I kept having first week and a half here, is I'd stick it too far down into the coal and just burn it off.
Square nail.
Always a fun thing about coal is there's hot spots in there and then there's cold spots in there, and you don't know which one you hit until you pull the metal back out.
How deep is your pit, I guess, or your bottom? How deep is that? Is that like 6, 8
I'd say this one's
inches?
about 5 inches or
5
so.
inches or so.
I think that one's a little bit more shallow. I don't know if it's the size of the bellows or the deepness of the pot, but I can usually get this one a little bit harder than I can on that one. There we go.
workout in itself, just keeping the blower going.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason the apprentice's first job was to run the bellows.
Run the bellows.
Get your arms pumped up a little bit. My sleeve up, so I'll start catching the tongs in it. Ended up with a nice burn across my hand.
We're going to go to the Junction Cafe, but first we're going to walk down the road to the Pricketts
We're
Cemetery.
going to walk down the road just from the fort to see the graveyard. We are at the graveyard. Pricketts. There's part of the graveyard in the back, behind the rhododendron trees. More Pricketts. Circling back to the main graveyard. Dated 1927 to 1991, Robert L. Prickett, Revolutionary War. A bench overlooking Pricketts Creek. We're taking a path we believe will end up at the amphitheater. We walked from the graveyard on a path, brought us to the amphitheater. On the landing at the amphitheater are bricks with names in memory of. We're in the lower parking lot now. Birds on the water. This is the lower parking area. You have kayaking and a boat launch ramp. This is the restaurant. Here's a menu for the Junction. It's the Junction at Pricketts Fort. We got egg salad, chicken fillet, BLT.
Chicken Philly was really good.
These rentals. It does say bike and kayak rental, inquire within. It smells really good in here. Hi.
How are you?
Good, and you? Yes.
Here's 2 menus. You have a seat wherever you'd like. Okay, and we'll bring right out.
Okay, thank you.
When you walk into doors, the food smells really good. There's a large menu to pick from, too. There's also coolers with fresh fruit and desserts and more that you can grab and go, or you can sit and eat. I got the taco salad, but on the menu there was a Jacob Prickett sandwich for $9.49. It had grilled Angus roast beef, Swiss cheese, lettuce, ranch dressing on a Kaiser roll. That looked pretty good too. I like the name too. On the back side of the menu is the rental page for the bikes and kayaks. And I see paddle boards on there too.
Lots of cars because of the Geo event.
During the summer, there's hiking and biking, boating and fishing, picnicking and birding. You have just watched a Joe Garbart Studio video.